Alright, welcome to the first video of the 2014-15 school year, and today we want to be able to find composite functions. Now, a composite function is where we take one function and put it into another. In other words, if we had f of x and g of x, the composite of those two would be f, and we put g inside of x. Now, if we went ahead and named those things, if I said that f of x was equal to x plus 4 and g of x was equal to 3x squared, what we would do is use a notation like this. We'd use that little circle right there that says f of g of x. And all that really means is that we're putting g into x. So f of g of x would be, where we have the x up there, we would put 3x squared plus 4. And that's f of g of x. Now if we went the other way, g of f of x, in other words, we were taking f and putting it into g, what we would have is 3 times x plus 4 squared. So, let's take a look at another example. Let's say that I told you that f of x was equal to 2x squared, and that g of x was equal to 1 minus 3x squared. And I want you to find f of g of x, g of f of x, f of x, I know that's wild and crazy, and g of x. Right? So what this means is we're going to take f and we're going to put g into it. And that means that we're going to have 2, and then instead of just an x squared, we're going to have what g equals 1 minus 3x squared, and all of that squared. And g of f means we're going to take f and we're going to put it into g. So we're going to have 1 minus 3, but instead of just the x, we're going to take the 2x squared, that's what f of x is, and we're going to square that. And we're going to leave that alone just for now. It would be fun to simplify, but we're just going to leave it. Now f of f means that we're going to take f and take what f is itself and put it back into f. So 2, but instead of an x squared, I'm going to replace that x with a 2x squared, and that's going to be squared. Right? And again, we could simplify that into 8x to the 4th power, but we don't necessarily have to do that here. Now g of x is the same thing but with g, where we have g of x, and we're putting g of x into it. So that becomes 1 minus 3, but now instead of x squared it becomes 1 minus 3x squared, and all of that squared. Okay? Not too bad. Let's take a look at another one. Let's take a look at one that's just a little more interesting. Let's say that I told you that f of x was equal to 1 over x plus 3, and that g of x was equal to negative 2 over x. Now, if I asked you to find f of g of x, we would go 1 over, but now where we have that x, we're going to put what g is equal to. So we'd have negative 2 over x plus 3. Okay. And for me, you can leave it just like that. You don't need to get rid of that fraction in the denominator. Okay. Now, let's see, what else should we look at? Let's take a look at something like f of x equals the square root of x plus 7, and g of x equals x squared plus 14. Now f of g of x. Well, f of x is the square root of x plus 7, so I'm going to start out with the square root, but instead of x, I'm going to put what g equals, which is x squared plus 14, but then I've got to go plus 7. Right? X squared plus 14 takes the place of x, and it's the square root of all that, and this one is real easy to simplify. It becomes x squared plus 21, and the square root of that. Alright, now let's stick with these two things, and let's say f of x was the square root of x plus 7. And let's see, what was g of x? X squared plus 14. Yep, g of x was x squared plus 14. Now let's say I wanted f of g of 2. Well, what could we do with that? Well, let's find f of g of x. We did that. And in the last page, we found that that was the square root of x squared plus 21. Okay? So now f of g of 2, we're just going to replace the x with a 2. So we've got the square root of 2 squared plus 21. And that equals 5. Alright. Should we do one more? Yeah, what the heck. Let's do one more. Let's say f of x is equal to x to the 3/2 power, and g of x is equal to x plus 7. Okay? And we want to know what g of f of 4 is. Okay. Well, the first thing we do is we find g of f of x. And we see that that is going to become x to the 3/2 plus 7. So then g of f of 4 is going to equal 4 to the 3/2 power plus 7. Well, square root of 4 is 2, cubed is 8 plus 7, and that is 15. And that brings us to the end of our very first video of the year. Come prepared to work on problems like this tomorrow in class. Have a nice night.